Folks, welcome to another episode of the UK Ice Hockey Stick Together Tribe podcast. I am just so excited to have this next guest on, a man who I've been trying to coax in some kind of Facebook Live or podcast over the last 3 or 4 years. But finally, we got you to sit down, Jeff, and tell us your story. The one and the only Jeff Smith. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. Sorry it's taken so long to get on.
Oh, buddy, life is life and people are busy, and I totally understand. I've been, since we last saw each other for that coffee in London.
Yeah.
Oh, which is probably 4.5 years now. 4.5 years, yeah. Yeah, I've seen you've been really busy and everything with Big Moose, and we're gonna get into all of that. The format of this is that we're gonna break everything down into a hockey game. First 20 minutes is gonna be about your life falling in love with the game and those early Streatham days. Second period is gonna be about your pro career. And then the third period is gonna be magical as we talk about life after hockey and everything from setting up a beautiful charity to climbing Mount Everest with 2 fake hips. So I'm so happy that you could come on.
Does it go
today.
to OT or penalties? Because I'm kind of used to that.
Well, the famous one, right, against Murrayfield. So I'm sure we're going to definitely go to an overtime and maybe a penalty shootout. But I'm not going to try to shoot against you, and because you got such a good record in penalty shootout. I actually, we'll get into that at the time because I was actually at that game. So
No way.
Yeah,
Did
I
you
was there
enjoy it?
watching it. Oh, it was incredible. It was incredible. I think it was my first time watching a Wembley game. So
Wow.
there you go.
Chose a good one.
I did. We'll get into that, Jeff. I'm keeping an eye on the time, the 20 minutes. Doesn't have to be 20 minutes exactly, but let's get the timer out. As a goalie, I'm sure you didn't have to take many face-offs, but let's take this one. Here we go. We're dropping the puck. Jeff, I know a little bit about your early career because I think my ex-wife used to skate at she used to skate at the Sobell Center.
Okay.
Yeah, and I
What was her
believe
name?
Katie McGovern at the time.
Name rings a bell.
Yeah, that family. What was that family that did all the figures? Geez, it begins with a C. Anyway, there was a figure skating family there, and she learned how to skate there. But I remember mentioning your name, and she said, "Oh yeah, Jeff Smith. He used to come out onto the ice at the Sobell Center." So was it Sobell that you got on the ice, or was it in Streatham?
Sobell Sports Centre. It was the tiniest ice rink in the world, but somehow we learnt to play hockey and managed to forge a professional career out of it. So I think I'm the only one that actually came out of there, to be honest. It was a great place to learn my skills.
It's an incredible place. I was coaching the Lee Valley Learn to Play there 3 years ago because Lee Valley closed and they were waiting for the new rink to open. So me and Eddie Joseph used to go down there on Saturday nights with the Learn to Play.
Used to
And
play
I was
with
living.
a great guy.
Oh, amazing man. I was so heartbroken about what happened, but it's such a special place because me and him on set, like I was living in Soho, so I would get on a double-decker bus and I would go into Islington on the bus and I would get out and I would coach these kids from all different backgrounds. And probably one of the most magical time in my life was that year coaching Saturday night Learn to Play at the Sobell Center. So I totally understand, your love of that place.
Yeah, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot of skills and taught me how to sort of skate, play hockey, and my first interaction with girls as well. So it was, I learned a lot at that place.
Like figure skaters?
But that's another podcast.
Okay.
Geez,
Um,
we digressed really quickly there, didn't we? And that was
yeah,
my fault.
there we did. Hey, I married one. They're pretty hot.
Back to
Jeff, how did
hockey.
you? What's up, buddy? Back to hockey. Okay, so how did you end up in Streatham, and what was it like in those early days? Oh, I just had Jason Wood on as well. So
Yeah.
he was one of your proteges, and he's like, oh, I don't want to go on after Smith. I don't want to go on after Jeff.
He used to say that
So
back in the day as well.
yeah, yeah. But I know he was a young kid in Streatham. You were there before him. Everyone talks about what was happening in Durham and Streatham, in those 80s and early 90s, and you were part of that. So what made Streatham such a special place to learn how to play hockey?
Um, I didn't really learn to play hockey there. I learned at the Sobell, but I had an altercation with the coach at the Sobell, and I just went through a period of life where I was 16 and I thought I was enjoying life away from the ice rink, and I kind of gave up for about a year or two. And then I went to an ice hockey match at Streatham, saw the Redskins playing, saw Gary Bryan in goal for them playing really well, absorbed the atmosphere, loved the atmosphere, and thought, why have I quit? I need to get back into it. So I drove over age 17 to Streatham to see if I could make into the Redskins team. Spent a season in the B team, and then hopefully impressed them enough to give me a spot on the Redskins team where I played with Bryony for a number of years, which was great. So it was fantastic. Great place to play.
People talk about goalie tandems, and the Andy Mogues and the Grant Fuhrs and stuff, but a lot of
Yeah.
people mention the goalie tandem of Brian and Smith. What made that relationship so great?
I think we were very competitive. And I think there
Mm.
probably was, you could probably get a fag paper between the two of us when it comes to skills. I think Gary was almost, I wouldn't say my nemesis, but we were very competitive. And when he went on to play at Medway and I was playing at Cardiff, we had many, many games where we were very, very sort of up against each other. And I loved playing against him. We actually played a testimonial game at Slough, and it was him in one end and me in the other. And we were as competitive as we were when we were professionals. So I don't think that ever leaves you, but I've got fond memories of playing with Gary.
Yeah, I know you both personally, and you both have this drive in you. There's this like just the determination, whether it's in the sports arena or in the corporate arena or wherever. You both seem to have this fire in your belly to drive forward and to accomplish things that other people just it isn't in them. I often think about, like, because I'm a stepdad, three boys. I'm like, what's the motivation? What's the magical elixir? Think about guys like you and this determination you have, and other athletes. Do you think that it was a rivalry, with another athlete that really helped spur you on and learn more about determination and discipline?
I think we both came from broken homes, Gary and myself, and I think maybe that might be a similarity of when we were growing up. But I think once we got onto the ice, there was a massive competitive nature, which was good because I think we probably both drove each other on. So he would push me, I would push him, and I think the beauty was that Strem got to the playoffs and had some success in the time that we played for them.
Why goaltending? That, like, people talk about, why but the passion that led him into a certain position, but we always talk about goaltenders as being people who are a little bit different. Um,
You're being polite.
I don't want to use the word crazy, but maybe a little bit crazy. Why goaltending?
For me personally, I was at Sobell. It was no romantic story. It was just somebody got hurt. Our goalie didn't turn up, and then somebody got hurt in the other goal, so there was no goalie on the ice whatsoever for training. So I just put the pads on and kind of enjoyed it, enjoyed catching pucks and enjoyed stopping players, and it just sort of grew from there really. So there's no real romance to the story. It was being thrust into it really. But once I got the pads on and got the catching glove on, I really enjoyed it and thrived. And trained really hard. I was very meticulous about my training. I was doing a public speech the other day, and I was referencing going back to ice hockey. And I remember I used to have a catching glove and a tennis ball and a tennis racket in my room, and I would toss the tennis ball up from the catching glove, hit it with the tennis racket off the wall, and then catch it, and then do it again and again and again, thousands of times, just to get my reflexes going and just to sort of get my hand-eye coordination going. So I think that I was, in everything that I've ever done, I've always been very meticulous about my preparation. And I took it back to that age where I was probably 10 or 11, and to be able to sort of practice and try and sort of craft your art, I think was something that was, I don't know where it came from, but I was very deeply ingrained in trying to become the best that I could possibly be.
Normally, a young athlete has other like someone to look up to. You know, like when I was growing up, it was like Brian Trottier and Mike Boston because I was a big Islanders fan. Even though Edmonton was closer to me, growing up in Saskatchewan, I didn't quite like Wayne Gretzky and Yari Curry when it was compared to Trottier and Bossy. I was more of an Islanders guy. You growing up in London, not much exposure to the NHL, especially at the Sobell Center. Who were the people that you were looking up to and helping you, guiding you in those early years?
Well, surprisingly, I did actually have contact with the NHL through the hockey news. I used to get the hockey news, which was very rewarding, and I learned a lot from it. I remember reading about pre-game meals and pasta. I didn't even know what pasta was at the age I was. And I was like, went to my mum and said, I want to eat pasta as a pre-game. What is pasta? And she said, it's basically just spaghetti. And I was like, okay, I want to eat spaghetti. So I just wanted to carb up and get some pasta inside me. So I learned that from reading about that in the hockey news. My hero was Billy Smith. And I think the reason for having Billy as my hero was that he was a playoff goalie. He would have a standard season, and then come playoff time, he would absolutely stand on his head and win trophies and be exemplary in his example. So for me, he was kind of my hero, and I think I probably tried to emulate him when it came through to playoff time. Playoff time was my time. I loved the playoffs. I loved the pressure and the exposure to the pressure. It was Billy Smith all the way.
What a character too. I think he was the first goalie to actually like score a goal from shooting the puck. There were other goalies that it would bounce off of them and then the play would go back into an empty net. But I think he's the first guy to record it. So he was good with his stick. He was also pretty good at hacking out ankles.
Yeah, he
pretty
had
physical.
Alan Billy, as he was known.
Yeah, he had quite a temper on him. Did you ever have a temper on you?
No, not at all.
The look away gives it all.
Next question.
Yeah, you were also known for having a big head of hair too, right?
I had hair. Didn't know about a big head of hair. I just literally had hair. That and charm and good looks have all left me. I had them when I was younger, but they've gone.
No, they haven't, buddy. We're like fine wine, right? Bit of gray, bit of salt and pepper, it's all good.
Experience. That's what it is.
That's what it is. So let's get back to the Sobell Center because it is a small ice pad. It's probably like less than a third of the size of a normal rink. So as a goalie, like what was it like? Angles, checking things. You're obviously getting probably more pucks than you would get in a normal sized ice rink. And then what was it like going to normal ice? Because I played most of my hockey in England on the Isle of Wight, which was like 2/3 of the size of a normal rink.
Yeah.
And that adjustment was hard enough. I can't imagine what it was like going from Sobell to an Olympic size or something.
As I mentioned, I had a year or so off, so I kind of lost my idea of size, and it probably didn't really phase me when I got into. It probably made it easier for me, if I'm honest, because I think at Sobell, like you say, you have to be very aware of things because the play's pretty much always ready for people to take a shot from anywhere in the ice pad. But once I got to Streatham, it seemed to fall into place, and I played with some good guys. And once I made the Redskins team, it just sort of grew from there, which was fantastic.
I often, in those early years of playing hockey, a lot of guys, they talk about falling in love with the game. And that's what this first period is about, is falling in love, when we fell in love with it. And it's this idea of the difference between playing for fun with your buddies and going out and just doing stuff, and you know, and then getting the hockey news review and reading things, this passion of hockey growing inside of us.
Yeah.
And you know, I was talking to Woody about it the other day, like how like growing up in London, you know, hockey's not on the radar of any major sports. It's only a few rinks. Where does the love come from? Like, when did you start to go, oh, I really love this? And was it always on the ice, or were you out, like you mentioned the tennis ball and stuff? Were you outside playing with your buddies?
My first experience of ice hockey was my uncles took me to Wembley to see a team called the London Lions, who were like a farm team for Detroit. So they had international players and they had players that were youngsters coming through the system and also some of the veterans. So there was a team called London Lions, and they used to play against Dynamo Moscow and teams from the Czech Republic and stuff like that. So I went and saw a couple of games there, and I literally fell in love with the sport there. And once I had the opportunity to discover that there was a team they were starting a team at Sobell, I think I just fell in love, hook, line, and sinker. And my passion for the game was just superb and was second to none. I loved it more than anything. It was the most important thing in my life, more than anything, really. And I think if you're going to do anything that you do in life, I think passion is a massive driver, whatever you do.
I suppose what we'll get that into a little bit in the third period, but I love passion and purpose. You know, the two
Yeah,
kind of interweave, interwoven, and you know, for me, hockey was my passion, also my purpose for a long time.
yeah.
And when did you start to go, oh, I'm gonna like you know, you're living and breathing hockey, you're learning about free games, you're playing it solo, I know you have that year off, but and then you end up in Streatham. When did you think, oh, okay, I want to start regularly playing on a team, and I want to know how this develops into possibly a career?
When I was at Streatham, there was no professionalism, so nobody was getting paid apart from a few of the Canadians. So the British boys weren't getting paid. But we managed to get to Wembley with Streatham for the first time ever, and we played in the playoffs. We lost, but we played in the playoffs, which was kind of what I dreamt of from day one, playing back at Wembley where I'd seen that first London Lions team. So that became quite a romantic way. I met my wife there as well the same year. And then I had a fallout with the coach. Seems to be a recurring theme, falling out with coaches. But I'd been told, don't know what your thoughts on this are. I was told by the coach at the time at Streatham, I'd played the second half of the season because Gary had got injured and had got suspended as well. So I was given the opportunity to jump in and play. And I went to the playoffs. We played against Durham, and I can't remember who the other team was, but I think it was Murrayfield actually, Durham and Murrayfield. Durham had won the league, and they'd not lost all season. And we went into the Durham ice rink and we beat them 9-2. I had one of those games where just everything seems to go right. So we managed to scrape a win out, which was fantastic. And then we came back to Streatham for the final game. And if we played against Durham, the reigning champions, and got a draw, then we went to Wembley and put the reigning champions out of Wembley. And we managed to have another great game, and we tied it 5-5. So we got the draw, which saw us go back to Wembley. And then the coach at the time came up to me before the game at Wembley and said to me, or the week before Wembley, and said, well, Gary had a fantastic first half of the season. So the way I'm going to play it is I'm going to put you in for the start of the game at Wembley. And then halfway through, I'm going to put Gary on, which I was literally devastated with and thought was completely the wrong decision. And I think even if he'd have thought that, I think the way he motivated me was completely incorrect. I think he should have kept that quiet and just let me think that I was going to play the game, because no matter what I was going to do in that game, play well, play bad, I knew that I was coming off halfway through the game, which I think was demotivating and was probably the worst coaching decision I've ever witnessed. So
My thoughts exactly. I think, well, I know goalies are different anyway, but you know, the whole idea of a coach is to keep the confidence high of a goalkeeper.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not to say, dude, you've got 30 minutes, that's it, right?
No,
No matter what. Yeah.
completely demotivated me. So I thought that I
Mm,
was just disappointed. So I got a phone call from John Lawless, sorry, from Chuck Taylor at the end of the season. And he said he wanted to pay me and he wanted me to go and play at Telford. And I was like, I found somebody that tells me that he loves me and we all love to be loved. So it was kind of off ski, which was a shame because I loved the Streatham setup, but I just thought I can't play under this coach.
yeah. We'll get into Telford because that's, I suppose, is the move to when you start saying I'm going to make a career out of this. But
Yeah.
as we wrap up the first period, like I say, I'd like to know where the like when is the difference between love and passion and all of a sudden getting into this competitive nature where you don't know then, but there is a phone call coming from Chuck Taylor where you can make that leap into becoming semi-professional, professional, getting a contract, making this something that you're like, hey, I am a hockey player.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. So when did that happen? Like, did it happen before the phone call, or was this thing inside? Was there a thing inside of you? It's like I don't want to just play this for fun.
I probably wasn't aware that there was the potential to become professional. So from my perspective, it was committing time, effort, energy, passion, love for the sport and giving my best at every possible moment. So I did that without ever thinking or dreaming that I could get paid for it. But I think
Mm,
the transition to Telford was a much more professional team. And I think they're moving on to Cardiff as well. Just everything about the two teams that I went on to was much more professional. And I think that probably was driven by money. And
yeah.
that wasn't a case I was chasing money. It was more a case of it was there. And I think sport in general was becoming more professional with regards to the science of sport.
Mm,
So there was
mm,
dry ice training, dry land training, and there are things that we hadn't done in the Streatham days. And it was, you'd train twice a week, go and play games. Whereas once I moved to Telford and to Cardiff, things were a lot more intense. But I loved that intensity and I loved training and I loved being part of a team that was
yeah.
together a lot more than the Streatham guys were, if that makes sense.
It does, and I'm thinking now, like when you reflect on those early years, falling in love with the game and the passion for it, what's the memory? Like I know a lot of guys talk about the smells of the rinks and going outside the back and just playing around with guys and shooting pucks off of brick walls and stuff. Just these are early fun memories of being in junior systems and minor hockey. What are your highlights of that period of time for you?
I think probably when we actually qualified for Wembley that year that I was talking about for the playoffs and actually making the drive on the 52-seater bus from Streatham to Wembley and seeing the stadium come into view and the nerves kicking in and just believing that I'd made the transition full circle from going and watching the London Lions and having heroes and looking up at guys who were gargantuan in their size to actually now having the ability to go and play on the same ice surface was very full circle. So I think it was probably that was the biggest moment of magic for me when I was growing up.
Beautiful. What a way to end the first period, Jeff. 20 minutes on the nose.
Cool.
Um, this is the thing now where I like to ask guys in the intermission, like about superstitions and about what your intermission routines were. And hands down, like I can't say everything that goalies have said to me in the past because goalies are always a little bit different. But what were your superstitions and routines and what did you like to do in between the breaks?
I think my superstitions probably started before the game. So I would listen to Bruce Springsteen. Rosalita was my driving song. And Bruce used to get me hyped up, and it was like hype up music, which before hype up music was a thing, really. So I remember referring back to the game against Durham, knowing the pressure was on. I remember parking, and I could see three 52-seater Durham buses with all their fans on. And I listened to Bruce Springsteen singing Rosalita, and I just got so hyped up and so ready for the game. And I got out of my car, pulled my bag out, and walked past these Durham fans who gave me some friendly, jovial abuse, and I just thought, I'm going to stop you from getting to Wembley. And by getting the fifth goal against them, that they didn't actually beat us, was the moment where we were like, I remember there was about 30 seconds to go on the clock. I remember looking over at Jamie Crapper, or Craper as he's now known, and he was looking at me and he was kind of like trying to own me, and I was trying to own him, and we'd had two very combative games in the playoffs. And he got the puck and he tried to get a shot away. And I think it was Gary Stefan actually got in front of him and stopped me from having to make a save. But it was, clock went down. It took quite a long time, but when we actually managed to hear the hooter go, it was just phenomenal. So I think in answer to your question, Bruce Springsteen was my driving force.
Yeah.
I was very superstitious, and I had a season where probably my best season ever, where I played at Cardiff, and I was struggling massively with nerves, huge style with nerves, and we were playing some very big games. I remember I was actually being sick before games, getting so nervous, which wasn't conducive to playing well. So with Shannon Hope, who I'm sure you're aware of, he's a bit of a crazy cat and was my defenseman at Cardiff and one of my best friends. And I used to go and have pre-game lunch in Cardiff with him, and he said to me one day, "Come on, Smitty, have a beer." And I'm like, "We've got 3 hours until the game," and he's encouraging me to have a beer. And he cracked 2 beers, and we drank a beer each. And I went and got man of the match in the game that we were playing against. And for the rest of that season, I drank a beer literally in the dressing room before every single game. I didn't make it visible, I didn't make it public, but I used to sneak off with a beer in my bag to the toilets, and I used to open it with my teeth and then just drink a beer. So my superstitions were ridiculous, but I had the best season I've ever played for Cardiff. We won everything. I managed to play for Great Britain, and every game that I played, I drank a beer before it. So I wouldn't encourage it, kids, but I think superstitions are, it's placebo, isn't it? It's very much placebo.
Yeah. I thought there's also something in about the Dutch courage. I mean, like, I get it. Me, I've been drinking over 8 years, but I completely imagine what it was like. I would do it for big meetings and stuff like that, but I was a little bit different,
I went
different
through
than
the
that.
season thinking that nobody knew that I was doing it, but it turns out eventually that the boys all knew that I was doing it, and then I'd sneak off with a program and a beer.
Yeah.
Go, he's off. He's gone for his beer, but we were winning. So when you're winning, nothing matters. It'll
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
what you want and need to do.
Yeah, amazing. I suppose I do also want to ask a little about a bit in the intermissions about equipment. I know like goalies equipment has changed so much, over the years. But equipment. How did you look after it in the intermissions? Did you have to dry anything out? That kind of stuff.
I was talking to my daughter recently because I just come off of doing a run where I was running 4 miles every 4 hours, and my trainers were getting wet. And I said to my daughter, "We'll just use a hairdryer." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "We'll just use a hairdryer. That's what I used to do with my hockey kit." So
Mm,
I remember when we used to go up to Scotland and play double headers, we'd sort of play a big game. I used to sweat a lot, so my gloves used to get really wet. And then the first hour back in the hotel after we'd eaten would be putting a hairdryer in the gloves just to dry them off, which was
yeah.
probably not good for their longevity. But who wants to play in wet gear? It was horrible, eh?
Yeah, and I can't imagine all the leather that you guys would have to wear back then too, and that getting wet and weighing you down by an extra few pounds.
I'd love to have known how much, because as you say, and you play at rinks like Ayr where they cut the ice, but there'd be water left on it as well. So you'd end up with soaking wet pads. I'd love to know what the difference in weight between
Mm,
putting them on at the beginning of the game and taking them off at the end of the game would have been.
yeah.
But it was all there was. There was nothing else to compare it with. So you just go on with it.
No. Yeah. And let's get on with the second period, Jeff. We're
Yeah.
gonna drop the puck and we're gonna talk about yeah, Chuck Taylor giving you that call. And you're like, oh, okay, what's happening here? And heading on up to Telford, which was a newer organization at the time as well.
Yeah.
and playing in proper hockey.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I only played one season there, but Chuck's become a lifelong friend of mine. I played with some great people, some Rig Farrer, and uh, I think John Wolfe was the goalie that I was playing with. I had a great relationship with John, and we just had a really good team. So I enjoyed the
Hmm.
success that we had there. And I was actually getting paid. It was my first season of getting paid, which was kind of weird. It was I'd be doing this for nothing and would have probably played. I would have played every year of my career without getting paid. But the fact that I actually made a living at it just made it even more brilliant, really.
And then that you had that year there, and then it was a trip over to Cardiff where you really, made a legacy for yourself and the name of Jeff Smith as a goalkeeper in those Cardiff days. How did you end up in Cardiff?
Johnny lied to me. Johnny
Surprise,
Lawless.
surprise.
Johnny Lawless said to me that we had a phone call and he said to me, I want to build a team from the back. So I want to start with the goaltender. And he charmed me. And then I said to him, well, Chuck Taylor's given me an offer of sending me to Canada to a goalie school. So Lawless said to me, okay, leave it with me. I'll see what I can do. And he came back and he said, yeah, we're going to a goalie school. So I said, fantastic. So he turned up at my house in London, ready to fly over to Canada, which we did. We flew over and stayed with one of his friends, took our hockey gear with us, and then he said, right, we're off to the rink. So for this hockey school. So we get into this rink and there's John and myself. And that was the hockey school. So we got on the ice. He came in and did a load of one-on-ones for me for probably about 10 minutes because we both were exhausted. And then we looked at each other and we said, should we get off? And we just got off, showered, and didn't open the hockey bags again. We just went and had a few beers and just partied and had some good fun. We did that, I'm ashamed to say, I'm ashamed, not ashamed to say, for 3 years. So we went to hockey school. And the second year we took our bags with us, didn't get on the ice anywhere. And the third year we went to hockey camp and didn't even take our
No,
bags.
I love it. Probably one of the best hockey schools I've ever heard of. Amazing.
I didn't learn a lot, but it seemed to work, seemed to be okay. And I remember Shannon Hope, who also had a pilot's license, flying down to meet us, and he came out with us and did hockey camp as well for 2 years. So it was, yeah, I'm allowed to talk about things like that nowadays. At the time, it was very much a sort of, you would never talk about that, but they were good days and they were naughty days, but fun at the same time.
And you're talking about hockey in the UK around the late 80s. And I think this
Yeah,
is for me, like I moved to England, from Saskatoon in 1989. And that's when I started getting exposed to the game. And for me, it was such a magical time because the games that I got to go watch, seeing the Sheffield Arena open, like that late 80s, early 90s, being exposed to hockey, the three import rule, getting to listen to and meet British players who, to me, it seemed so cool in the way they talk. And you just, and they were hardworking. They were falling in love with it, or had already fallen in love with the game. It was a really magical time. And when new rinks like Cardiff were opening up, and you had guys like characters like John Lawless go there and bring in people, even more characters like Shannon Hope. Again, you look back at this time where you're like, oh, we wouldn't talk about what happened on the road, stayed on the road, and now you reflect on it. And
yeah.
it's such a magical time of sport, not just ice hockey, but of sport, of being part of that community in that era.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it was the growth era. And I think I was very lucky to actually be part of that time and that period where things were growing and the sport was being recognized on mainstream television. So Grandstand was showing ice hockey regularly and the playoffs were being shown on TV. And it was just a growth era, really, which I'm very fortunate and thank my lucky stars that I was actually to be part of. So amazing time.
It really was. And the one area, the one position, that was always really focused on, with the three import rule, people would want to use the imports, as guys would play in the out positions. So really, British goaltending was really focused on as well because it was the key position where you needed a good British hockey player. So, what did you feel like there was added pressure as a British goalie? Was it something that you relished, and did you recognize that if I can be a good British goalie, like I can kind of write my own script here?
I probably never thought about it consciously. I think I just literally was focused on playing and never really thought about it either commercially or practically. But you're right in saying that if a team had great imports, the difference could be made by having a great goaltender that was British, or somebody like Tony Hand that was British, and the Cooper brothers that could actually make a difference. So when the Cooper brothers were playing at Durham, they were winning everything. And then John got his checkbook out famously and signed them for Cardiff, and we managed to have some success having them as part of our roster. So I think the Canadians kind of evened each other out, but it was
Mm,
having the difference in having great British players that actually could win tournaments and trophies.
mm,
I think you're
mm.
quite right with goaltenders as well as British players can make that difference.
And Cardiff, the Welsh capital, hockey there, ice hockey there for the first time, and it's now a mega hotbed of hockey.
Yeah.
And it stemmed from those days, really ice hockey, because of that time and the time that you were there. It really made a root. It grasped the soil of Cardiff, and when people talk about Cardiff, obviously they talk about rugby, but ice hockey is mentioned in the same sentence.
I'm English, but the Welsh people are extremely passionate about everything that they do from grassroots level. And I think rugby, as you mentioned, is their key sport. But ice hockey has found a place within the love of the Cardiff supporters, especially. And I think from the day that they opened the rink in the Welsh National Ice Rink, where they had capacity of about 2,000 people, they filled it. So once you start filling arenas, the passion just drives and the money comes in as well. So you can afford to pay great players. And John was pivotal to that, and hat off. I'm very thankful for him to bring me into the organization, but it was also great to see him build a franchise, build a team that Todd has taken over. They had a couple of barren years where they had a couple of dodgy owners, but I think Todd and the team that he's got behind him care about it. And I think going back to that passion word, they're not just about the profit, they're also about the passion and the people, which is pivotal, really. So lots of P's
Yeah,
there.
there are. I hope you don't have to do one right now.
No,
I'm
I'm
good.
good. I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm 61 yesterday, but I'm okay on my bladder.
Dude, I forgot to say it. I knew it was your birthday as well. I saw it on Facebook and I was going to say happy birthday. I'm not going to sing it to you unless you want me to.
You skip that?
Yeah, we'll skip it. I want to talk more about hockey in Cardiff, so I don't want to hear me singing.
Okay.
And now you're like hockey. Again, when I was exposed to hockey in Cardiff, it was very, very professional, and there's this determination and drive to win. And it was a thing that John had set upon the pressures of this new franchise and becoming a winning team right away. And he got into some amazing hockey players, as you mentioned. But what was it like to show up into that arena? A London guy relocating to Wales. I don't know if you commuted or if you actually moved there, but it would have been a long commute, wouldn't it? But what was it like in those early days there?
I commuted for a couple of years and then realised that I'd fallen in love with Cardiff and South Wales. So I decided to move up, and my wife and I decided to have a family, and we felt that it would be conducive to having a better environment, bringing up our kids in Cardiff than in North London, where I'm from originally. So I moved up a couple of years after joining the team, but the initial couple of years were, I think what John was a genius at was actually getting the chemistry of the team right. So he had some fantastic imports, Doug McEwen, Steve Moria, Shannon, as I mentioned. And I think he was just extremely good at getting the right people on the right team. It's kind of strange. I've played on a couple of successful teams, and I think when you've got successful teams and successful players, it just meshes. I think the coaches don't need to have loads of input. They just fine-tune things. And I think that's the beauty of a great coach. If you've got a great coach, they don't need to say lots. They just say what needs to be said when it needs to be said. And it's about timing. So I think the teams that I've played on where we've won things have very much been around coaches like Peter Woods and John Lawless and guys like that who have got success built into them. So I think Johnny did a great job in getting the team together, and then he just allowed us to, even when we were having a couple of our most successful seasons, we'd go to training, we'd just scrimmage, and you sort of look at it and go, how can you be doing so well by just scrimmaging and not running drills and getting, but it just worked, and the team worked hard, and we had fun. That was a very pivotal part of it as well. But when you're winning, it is fun, isn't it?
Well, it is. I can remember, I was playing on the Isle of Wight for a few years, and it was the third division, but we were winning, and our practices would be warm up the goalies, and then we would scrimmage. And I think that was the thing. It's like we just had a group of guys together that had fun, and of course, winning was part of it. Playing on the Isle of Wight was fun as well. Like taking the boat.
Yeah.
I lived there, but it was just this fun atmosphere, and it's one that I think of now. Working with athletes, working with teams, it's fun being sucked out of sport. And so I don't. Maybe we can talk about that more in the third period. But let's go back to trying to keep fun and the atmosphere in the changing room, because you mentioned some amazing guys: Doug McEwen, Steve Morris, Shannon Hope. I don't know, was Hilton Ruggles in Cardiff when you were there?
No, he came a year after I
Came
left.
after. But it's like amazing characters. And the Cooper brothers were there. So what was the changing room like? Because I know when we get into the third period, that is often one of the things the guys talk about is, the hockey was awesome, but I just missed the guys. I missed the changing room.
We had a fantastic team, and you mentioned the Cooper brothers, and I think we just had that winning mentality. And I think going back to the game that we played in Wembley where we had a penalty shootout, we were losing 6-5 against Murrayfield with about 30 seconds to go in normal regulation time. And Stephen Cooper just came along and popped a little goal in to tie up and take it into extra time. And I think the thing that I always remember was that nobody ever doubted that we were going to win that game. And I think that's the thing. And when you see great teams, whether it's whatever sport it is, it's about having that belief that you're not going to lose. And we had that. And I think it was palpable, the effect it had on me personally. It was no matter what's being thrown at you, you just have to sort of believe. And it's not a conscious belief. It's not having to sort of go, I believe, I believe, I believe. It's just, it's an aura. And I think if you'd have gone round to the dressing room when we were losing to Murrayfield in the final period, we were losing by about 2 or 3 goals, I think. And if you'd have said to any one of the players, take a lie detector and ask them the question, do you think you're going to win this game? They would have all honestly said, we do believe it. And I think having that belief is something that you can't get that. That's the magic sauce. But I was very lucky to play on a team that did it.
And I think you're right, because you as a goalie need to have faith and trust in your defenseman in front of you and the forwards in front of them. And then all those 5 guys need to have that trust in you, because you're the last line. And I feel like no matter what talent you have out there, chemistry, friendship, bond needs to be created for, like you say, there's knowing it up here, and then there's knowing it in here.
Yeah.
And it seemed like that year particularly, you guys just knew it. You guys knew what you were going to do.
I think we had confidence in each other. And Steve Moria has said a couple of really kind things about me. And I think he said that when we got to penalties, he knew we were going to win it because he just trusted me to do it. And it took 23 penalty shots to actually win the game, which was quite a lot of penalty shots. And we had quite a lot of opportunities to win the game, and quite a lot of opportunities to lose the game. But on the 23rd penalty shot, we won it. And I think that hopefully his faith was rewarded. But I think, like you say, the belief and the confidence in the team that you've got around you is really important.
Yeah. We talk about that magical era of hockey, because there was always that word Wembley. at the end of the season. Something that since I started playing, I think it ended when I was playing, but obviously I wasn't in the league. I was a league below, but two leagues below. But there was that thing of like we were playing the season to get to Wembley, and everyone talks about the Wembley experience. What happens in Wembley stays in Wembley. I'm not asking for any of that, but it was a weekend of unbelievable stories. You know, the things that teams would do to one another, like the changing room fiascos, and what people would do to other people's gates. And maybe that's just a rumor. I don't know.
No, that was true. I know who did
Was
it.
it?
I'm not
Did
going
you?
to say on here, but it was
Okay.
true.
We'll just say, folks, somebody did something to another person's skate on another team, and it had to do with
Somebody broke into somebody's dressing room and defaced this, blunted their skates and did all kinds
yeah,
of trickery.
yeah.
Just mind messing stuff.
Mind messing stuff. And again, I mean, I know you look back and or at the time you'd be pretty pissed off, but it's these things, these stories that come up around that Wembley weekend, and you know, my involvement in the sport, mainly in TV, was around what was happening up in at the playoff weekend in Nottingham, which you know it was fun. We had Hooters and things like that, but I miss that opportunity, you know, to be a part of either as a player or in TV, the Wembley magic. So, you know, what was it like in those years when you know, dropping the puck at the first game of the year, knowing, you know, and having that as a goal of being of participating in a Wembley weekend?
I'd played at Wembley once before for Streatham, as I alluded to earlier. But when we made the playoffs with Cardiff and got to Wembley, I can't remember who we played in the semi-finals, but we'd won the league. We'd got promotion from the league below, and we'd gone on and won the league quite convincingly. So we were probably favourites to win the playoffs. So I was in a completely different space. I think probably being amateur commercially and also mentally at Streatham, I don't think I was tuned in mentally enough. Whereas when I took the ice, when I was playing for Cardiff, I was very prepared, very full of belief, and just felt very professional in everything that I did in my preparation. So I felt very confident in myself and very confident in my teammates that we were going to actually go on to try and win it, which I think exudes from you, like you were saying about the confidence and the sort of confidence that people give when you've got a team that believe, and it's having that belief in your heart and also in your head. And I 100% had that. There was no doubt I was nervous before the weekend, but I just believed that we were going to do it. We just had to go through the actions and do the job, really.
When that's it, just do the job. And speaking of that, speaking of the job, like the job of the number one goalie, and I think about Cardiff, and I think about Jason Wood, and I think about Stevie Lyle, Lily, and good young guys who came up, you know, backing up number ones and then becoming number ones themselves.
Yeah.
You know, what was that? What was that? And then there was like, you know, you and Bryony were two number ones that were battling it out. So, you know, at that time of being a British number one, you know, how did you nurture the younger guys around you?
I used to coach them. So when I was at Streatham, I used to coach Jason. Jason, I think, is about 10 years younger than me. So I was 17 or 18. So he was 7 or 8 at the time. So I used to go out on the sessions with the kids and coach him. And then when I moved to Streatham, I used to go and coach the kids as well. And Lily, as you alluded to, came on and became, in my opinion, probably the best British goaltender there's ever been. I think he got voted that best British goalie ever, and had fantastic skill. I also worked with Gary Stephan and his brother Greg out of Detroit and not Colorado. Where was it? Near Detroit. We took Lily out to Detroit, and he played out there for a team because we hoped that we'd try and get him a pro contract. And he was playing with a guy called Robert Esch, and Robert Esch went on to get. So this was playing in the International League.
Well,
Maybe the International League. What's the
wasn't
one down from the NHL?
American League, and then they had the IHL. They had the International. It doesn't work, and then the East Coast League.
I think it was the IHL, but
IHL, yeah. Yeah.
He played out there for about a season alongside Robert Esch. And Robert Esch, I went out to see him because we got my place out there. And Robert Esch just had an edge, and you could see that he just had that mental toughness and resilience. And he was playing alongside Stevie, and Stevie was playing well, but just didn't have that toughness about him, unfortunately. And it's a shame because I think if someone like myself had been out there to help him personally, we could have brought that out of him. But he didn't have that. So Robert Esch went on to play for Philadelphia and made a fantastic career out there. But Lily came back, had a great career in UK and abroad, but just didn't make the show, which is a shame because I think he had the skills, but just didn't have the mental toughness.
Wonderfully talented guy. Maybe I'll send him the link to you and Woody's episode, and I'll convince him to get on as well and tell his story.
Yeah.
But as we start to wrap up the second period, Jeff, like I gotta, like that the shootout at Wembley, obviously a highlight. But what was it like to be, a professional #1 British goalie, in a golden era of hockey, and what were the highlights?
I think I just felt very blessed to actually be given an opportunity to be that kid that used to hit a tennis ball against his wall to try and hone his skills to actually come through to being able to play in the dream arenas and play in the Sheffields and the Wembleys and stuff where you've sort of got packed arenas and being on TV for the playoff game. I think at the time there were 11 million people watching Grandstand on a Sunday afternoon, and they interrupted the snooker to bring our penalty shootout onto the game. So we're in the highlight of the sport, I think, and just being privy to be part of that was a privilege. So I'm very honored.
It was a beautiful time in hockey. I'm wondering if as you said it too, my heart kind of aches, that to get ice hockey on the BBC nowadays, it's something that is easily done, but in knowing that broadcasters and big companies, their view of British ice hockey today is that they don't want to get involved with it because of the way it's run, and I'm not blaming anybody, but they say ice hockey is just like a snake trying to eat its own tail. And from that era where were on Grandstand and there's 11 million people to a time where, Great Britain are doing well and Pete's got the guys doing amazing and they're not getting any media coverage. It's kind of heartbreaking that it's gone from, your highlight reel Grandstand to where it is today.
How do you think we can improve that?
I think that honestly, in the top league, everyone's got to get on the same page. And I think that, it's all about money right now. It's all about money and it's all about profits. And there's only a couple of teams that can make those profits. And then the other teams are there just to kind of fill. And no one's working together. I think it's from, you need to reroute everything and go from power up, so we need to start giving power to the bottom and raise it, because it's this whole thing. And Jeff, what power over means people are in threat, fear, things are not going to run as well as they can as long as you have a power over system. So I think I would love one governing body, and I would love it to be a not-for-profit sport. I would love it to be something that it's a community-led, not-for-profit, CIC, even charities, as an overall organization. Because as long as people are in it to make money, it won't work the way it can work.
Do you think you could get involved?
So we're trying to do with this. That's the idea of this Get Together Tribe, is to get enough guys like us involved so that we can have a voice. And if there's enough people involved in this, then we'll have a voice. Not like a union or an association or anything like that, but as a community where players can actually start to have a bit of control and power.
Sounds good. I'll watch this space.
Sounds good. Let's watch this space. Let's end the second period. It's the inevitable. I think I will say there was a, you when we met for coffee, you said, Nick, life is like a hockey game split over 3 periods. We're now in the third period of our lives.
I
And
am.
well, I'm getting there, end of the second, but um, this third period, I'll drop the puck, I'll start it now, is life after hockey. And it's something that I've seen in you. I've seen you start a charity, which you can talk about the motivation behind starting Big Moose. I know you climbed to Mount Everest. I know you had a double hip replacement because you actually guided me getting meeting the doctor to who guided me to get my right hip done 2 years ago. So it might not have been on a deep level, but you've been involved in my life over the last, 5 or 6 years since I've seen you do the things that you do through social media. And even I do remember there was a time you came and visited me in my office in London. And I was I think you were just moving out of your company, the company that you had started, and you were kind of figuring life out, that corporate world. Maybe you were like, oh, Nick, I'm kind of phasing out of this. And I was really struggling. I don't know if you remember that, but I'd probably been drinking that day.
Yeah.
I was really struggling with my life. And I know that my struggles stemmed from when I stopped playing hockey, and I've managed to come full circle, not come full circle, but do, change it. But let's talk about your life after hockey, after you ended it in your career in Swindon, where you ended up, and now doing all the things that you're doing. And I'm sure 20 minutes isn't going to be enough, but I'm going to shut up now. So tell me, Jeff, what has life been like since you hung them up?
I've been very fortunate because I started to build a job whilst I was playing hockey. So I knew that I was going to be transitioning into finishing playing hockey, and I wanted to go out on a relative high. And I didn't want to keep on pulling them on and becoming that guy that used to be good. So I quit when I was 30, which is quite scary because that's 31 years ago. Very scary, actually. So I quit when I was 30 and moved into a job and a career that I've worked in ever since. But alongside that, unfortunately, we had the passing of my best mate, Gary Clunan, who was my defenseman at Streatham, nicknamed Moose. And we decided that we would do something to sort of leave as a legacy for him. We didn't really know what it was going to look like, but the mountaineering side of things was something that was initiated by my daughter Chloe, who wanted to go and climb Mount Kilimanjaro in 2010. So in 2010, I followed her because she needed a guardian to go because she was only 15 at the time. So she wasn't in a position where she could go on her own. So I went out as her dad and guardian and had to learn to climb a mountain, which I'd never done before. And the first night on the mountain, we slept in a tent, which as a North London boy was the first time I'd ever slept in a tent. I'd never actually had any experience with the outdoors. So it was quite funny when I came down to breakfast after the first night on the hill and just told everybody in the camp that it was my first night. They all kind of looked at me and was like, I don't think they knew that whether I was joking or taking the mick, but it was interesting. But I fell in love with mountaineering probably the same as I fell in love with ice hockey, and it became very much a part of my life. So 2010 did Kili with Chloe, then went to Russia, then went to Alaska, then went to Nepal to try and climb some mountains before the Everest thing. But I think the Everest I went out twice to climb Everest, once in 2014 where I didn't manage to do it, and once in 2017 where I managed to get to the top. But in 2014, we'd lost Moose 7 years prior, and his widow had asked if I would take his ashes to the top and sprinkle them for her, which was a massive ask and something that I was very proud to attempt to do. But there was a huge accident on the mountain in 2014, which killed 16 Sherpa when an ice fall the size of a two-story building fell, an ice serac fell onto some Sherpa. So the Sherpas were killed, and the decision was made. There was a big team meeting at base camp when everybody decided that we wouldn't actually climb out of respect for the Sherpa that had fallen. So I came home somewhat disappointed with the fact that I hadn't had the opportunity to follow my dream to the top of the world. But that was probably the pivotal moment where my life changed, because we'd been fundraising for Teenage Cancer Trust. And we'd set ourselves a target because I was 50 years of age at that time, and I decided that I would attempt to try and raise £50,000 for TCT. But we managed to actually raise £60,000, which was brilliant and I was very proud of. But what it did was it literally changed my life, because I came back having not made the summit of the mountain, but having made the summit of the fundraising target. So I came back, we had the 60,000, and we decided to create something called Big Moose. We didn't know what it was going to look like, but it was at the time just a Facebook group where what we would try and do is just create a legacy of something kind, something good, something sustainable. It would be a legacy for Moose. So it started very small with very unknown future, and it's just grown from there, really.
I've I've experienced loss, you know, of losing guys who I either played hockey with, or people who I've known in the recovery community. As you know, that community, we suffer a lot of tragedies.
Yeah.
This, you know, I know you a little bit, you know, mainly like I guess through social media and the few encounters we've had, but you losing Gary seemed to really like affect you a lot as a man. Can you tell us more about what it was like to lose your best friend, you know, at a time when we shouldn't be losing people at that age?
Yeah, he was 42, which is way too young, and he had two children as well. So it was not appropriate, in my opinion, to lose somebody that young. I think losing him was a massive shock, but I feel very fortunate in the way that we did lose him, because he was dying of cancer and chose to shut myself and all of his other friends off, and he didn't want to actually see anybody. We talk on the phone regularly, but when he actually knew that he was dying quite quickly, he didn't want to have anybody come and visit him, which I completely understand, until such a point where, in my opinion, I think he knew the end was very nigh and very near. So his wife contacted us, myself and 9 other people from his hockey career, and said that he wanted to see everybody. So 10 of us drove up from around the country to Whitley Bay, where he lived with his wife and children. And we spent the day with him, and he opened the door and he was wearing a dressing gown. He looked very skeletal and looked like a man dying from cancer. But the first words out of one of our mouths was, "Nice to see you've made the effort," taking the piss out of him, basically, which broke the ice and just was very typical of dressing room humor and not allowing the moment to drag us down. So we spent the next few hours mocking each other, taking the mickey. Just it was just like being in a dressing room, and it was great to actually experience that last bit of happy time with him until he got quite tired, and his wife said that she thought it was probably time for him to go upstairs now and start resting, which he did. And then we all went up one by one and said our goodbyes. So it was very emotional, as you can imagine. But I also feel very honored to have been given the opportunity to say goodbye in that way and say our last sort of words to each other. And then once we'd all finished saying goodbye to him, we left, and within a week he'd passed. And his father-in-law, I remember Dave saying to me afterwards that it was almost like, you know, when you used to get those filament light bulbs that used to burn really brightly just before they popped, just before they exploded. And it was almost like Moose was the most Moose-like in that last day that we saw each other. And then he just popped and ended up leaving us. So it was very tough. And as you quite rightly said, it's affected me massively, and I think of him quite regularly because we have a very close relationship. But I now see it very much as a half full glass as opposed to a half empty glass. I think at the time it was very much an empty glass, but I think we've managed with what we've been doing with Big Moose to actually create something in his honour and as a legacy for him, which I'd like to think that he'd be very proud looking down on us with the work that we've done and we're doing.
I'm very fortunate that Big Moose comes up in my Facebook feed. So I get to keep abreast with everything that you guys are doing. And it's quite inspirational, Jeff, and we often talk about the magic of the changing room, and ice hockey is an extremely unique changing room because of the physicality of the game. But the banter, and the humor, and it's never really tested like it was in the situation. I suppose I don't mean tested, but really, you know what I mean? Like it's like we talk about, it is like the old days which is great, but all of a sudden now guys who have stopped playing, coming around each other, to say goodbye to a teammate.
Yeah.
You really viscerally feel the bonds and the connection. We can talk about it all day long, the bonds and the connections, but when it comes into action, in terms of what happened with you guys, you really know that we are part of an amazing game.
Yeah, an amazing community. I think the ice hockey community has been for me absolutely massive, and probably once a month something will happen and my daughter will say to me, ice hockey still playing its part, because somebody will come out from the woodwork and say they want to help or they want to get involved or there'll be a connection, and it's like, I used to watch you as an ice hockey player back in the day, and it doesn't ever fail to keep delivering. So I'm a massive advocate of community and the friendship group that I've got and built through ice hockey. I think it's a very powerful thing.
It is, and it's one I think that community is. I said game, being part of the game, and I think it's correct. It's a community, and particularly in the UK, it's such a special community because of the nature of how the game is run, and the fact that people don't get paid tons and tons of money. And in the lower leagues, guys are giving up their time, they're even parts of their salary, they're missing days at work so they can just be part of what's going
Yeah.
on. Now, you were fortunate because you, again, I suppose inside of you with this drive to run a business. How much of what you learned in hockey has helped you with your business and also with the charity?
Massively, I would say. I think the skills that I developed as a goalie and as an ice hockey player about never giving up, driving hard for what you believe in, and the fact that I said to Streatham that I wanted to play for them and drove across from North to South London and got a place on the team, got a place on the Wembley team as well. And all of those factors that took me to the levels of hockey that I played, I think have bode extremely well for me in everything that I've done, from having the determination and the drive to actually manage to summit Mount Everest. And then also, I think with regards to the charity side of things that we've done, it's having that belief and going back to what you were talking about, having it in your heart. If you believe in your heart and you believe in your head that you're going to do something, I think that I've got that from ice hockey. And I took that, I can think of an example that we did quite recently where, excuse me, I'd come back from 2017 summit in Everest and gone into pandemic in 2019, 2020. And basically I was frustrated with the fact that I hadn't been allowed the opportunity to do something more on a personal level with regards to climbing another mountain or doing something that I needed from a personal challenge perspective. And I was sat down, and I've missed a bit out, but we basically got to a stage we started a coffee shop. So my daughter and I had gone down to the homeless shelter in Cardiff, probably for almost 2 years, helping feed and clothe homeless people. and seeing that kind of stuff that was going on, which was quite new to me. But we did it for a couple of years and it impacted me massively. And I thought that we probably needed to do something to make a difference. I didn't really know what that looked like at the time, but inspired by the House of St Barnabas, which was a charity which is no longer going, but was a charity in Soho near where you lived, that used to have, it was a homeless charity. So what they did was it was a private members club. Have you been there?
I got married there last June. It was my
No
that
way.
was yeah, that was my it's that was where I worked from, the House of St. Barnabas.
Wow.
I was a member there, and me and my wife got married there on June 1st last year.
Fantastic place.
My heart broke when I found out it was closing down, and yeah.
But the principle for the listeners
Mm.
to know about is that they used to have this private members club, which was beautiful, and it had business rooms, meeting rooms, restaurant, bar, etc. It was a fantastic meeting place. And then on the top floor, they had the charitable side of things, where what they did was they got homeless people from Shelter, Centre Point, other homeless charities in London that would come onto a City and Guilds program for 12 weeks, learn hospitality skills, and then, as you probably know, would be parachuted into the club and work as waiters and waitresses and in the kitchens and stuff, which I thought was a fantastic model. So I decided that what we would do in Cardiff was we would create something similar on a very smaller scale and just open a coffee shop. So we did exactly that, and we got the coffee shop with a plan to employ homeless people and train them in barista skills. So our first young lad, which is the lad that actually has got me the Bruce Springsteen ticket. So it's
Mm.
funny how these things turn around, but his name was Kurt. And Kurt had come through our system and was working as a barista in the coffee shop. He was our first ever homeless person to be employed. And I thought he'd been doing extremely well, but he was struggling a little bit with his mental health, which was something that I hadn't really understood or witnessed before. So we got him some help, and he was making great strides in making improvements on his mental health. And one day I was in the office with him, and he was chatting away, and then I noticed that he was crying. I was like, I couldn't really understand because I thought he was doing well. I said to him, asked him the question, "Why are you crying?" And he looked at me straight on and he just said, "This is the first time that I've never felt like killing myself." And I was like, wow, massive impact. So I think it was that time when I realized that we needed to do more with our staff and other people around us that had mental health problems. So we started doing some fundraising and we started paying for therapists to look after people. So in the pandemic, during the pandemic, and when everywhere was closed, we had to close the coffee shop, but we had lots of people around us that were reaching out for help. And in that period of time, we actually had 5 people come to us and tell us that we'd actually saved their lives because they're on the path to suicide. So that period of time was pivotal to actually making me make the decision. And what we did was we were talking about potentially going back to K2 and climbing another mountain. And then I've got a guy that is based in America that mentors me, and he sent me over a video, and the video was really simple. And it basically said, the essence of it said that every day we're all writing our own eulogies, which is extremely simple, extremely basic. But if you think about it, it's true. And it made me realize that did I want my eulogy to read that I'd climbed K2? Or did I want my eulogy to read that I'd saved more people's lives? So from there, I came up with an idea that what we needed to do was well, on one hand, we had access to 300 therapists, which we knew of. And on the other hand, we had a lot of people coming to us, being referred to us for mental health help. The bit that was missing was the bit in the middle, which was just nice and simply money. So we needed money. So I think going back to the ice hockey analogy of being driven and having heart and having a belief in your head that you can do something, I created an idea that we would try and raise a lot of money. I thought for us to actually make impact, we need to do something really big. So I messaged my daughter telling her that I had an idea and just said, I think we need to raise a real big amount of money. So bearing in mind the previous year, we'd fundraised as a charity £27,000, which was a good amount of money and would helped manage to put those 5 people through therapy that had saved their lives. But it wasn't a lot of money. So what we decided to do was actually go big and have that belief to create something that we called Project 1 Million, which, as you probably can guess, is to raise £1 million for our charity. But the caveat was that we needed to do it in a year. So we'd gone from 27 one year to hopefully trying to achieve, see, smiling, achieve 1 million in a year, which we didn't manage to do. But we did manage to raise 1.16 million in 486 days. So it's kick-started the charity and we're doing some amazing work. We've now got 5 members of staff. And as of today, we've had 57 people come through our system and tell us that we had stopped them from taking that path to suicide. So it's kind of what drives me on and gives me purpose.
Amazing. Purpose, and I think that's the thing is like every day I wake up and I have a smile on my face because I know I've got a purpose in this world. And it happened when I was 45 years old when I got sober, and it was through, 12-step recovery that I found I was really good at working with other guys who were struggling with alcohol use.
Yeah.
And that's it. People could have said, Nick, you were above average hockey player. You were pretty good on Sky Sports. You ran a few businesses and you made a bit of money, but none of it fulfilled any purpose. The hockey, yes, at the time, but after that, up until I was 45 years old, I was just lost. I was just always trying to regain something that I thought I'd lost. And it was when I was like, and I don't get paid to help another guy, it's 12 steps. You don't charge any money, free.
Yeah.
But in it, I started to build a bit of self-esteem and I started to feel good about myself in terms of the fact that I was giving to people and I was helping people. And it gave me some purpose. And like I say, even today, I'm 53, I'm over 8 years sober, and I wake up with a little smile going, you're good at what you do.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how that's translated in your life. And then at 61 years old, you're just starting your 3rd period. You've raised over $1 million in charity. You've climbed mountains. How do you keep your purpose going? How do you shine it? How do you raise it? How do you polish it?
It's extremely simple these days because every day I get up and I know that there's an opportunity to help another person. So we've had nearly 2,000 referrals now. So that's nearly 2,000 people coming through to us going, I need a hand, I need help, that we're managing to help. And if you think about that number, 57 people that we don't go to people and say, did we save your life? We don't ask that question. These are people that have come to us and said, you saved my life. So if you think about that number, you think about what that represents, and you think about 57 funerals that haven't happened because of us, because of me and my daughter and our team and our supporters and our people that are our community that we've built around Big Moose and the legacy that we built for Gary Clunan, that's purpose enough for me for the rest of my life.
Beautiful. Thank you so much that's the end of the 3rd period. Thank you so much for joining me, Jeff. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you and all the work that you're doing. However, we do have an overtime period. You've done and said some things that have just created this little question in me. You've moved your hand a little bit like this about asking for help. And
yeah.
You said, on one hand, you've got this, on one hand, you've got this. And it's as you did that, it just reminded me of this documentary series that I saw in early sobriety. It was on Netflix. It was a fairly low budget 6-part documentary series about the pyramids. And it's fairly low budget. I think it's on YouTube now. But she was talking about hieroglyphs. And this woman describes these hieroglyphs, and she says, look at the gods. All the gods have left hands. She goes, because the left hand is for bestowing, for giving, and only God can give. They can't receive anything because they're a God.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I looked down and I was like, oh, I've got a right hand. What's that for? And I think in the next couple of sentences, she says the right hand is for receiving. And I was like, okay, well, as a human being on this planet, I've got a left hand and a right hand. What saved my life was at 45 years old, battling 15 years of drinking, always trying to fix it myself, always saying I'll do better, I'll manage better, I won't drink this, I won't drink that, always trying to figure things out because I had been taught that a real man doesn't ask for help. A real man doesn't show emotions because it's a sign of weakness. And I was taught that by coaches, teachers, and my father. Now, they thought that that was right at the time, but it was ingrained in me. So I never used this hand. You know, I was always trying to give, because we all like to help. We all like to help. But it was when I was 45 years old and I was dying of liver failure, kidney failure, acute pancreatitis, dehydration, and malnutrition because my vodka was my diet, straight vodka. And I'd smack down a peanut M&M every once in a while because I hated the taste. But finally, you know, after being just crushed and living, you know, in a squat in Toronto, I said, you know, help me, someone. I asked for help. And in doing that, it opened up this kind of channel for me, you know, and where I was like, oh, okay, so I'm good at giving help. I'm good at receiving help now. And I know that for me to be part of a community, I have to do both. So just the question is, do you ever, like, and I know you mentioned you have a mentor, but how do you counterbalance all the good that you do with looking after yourself and you know, and being able to say, do you know what, I might be struggling today, I need to ask for a little bit of help. Do you do that in your life, or is it just all you know, the charity work?
It's a great question. And in answer, I think I'm extremely fortunate insofar as I don't tend to have ever struggled with mental health problems myself. So I seem to be quite fortuitously strong in that regard. I have my moments where I have down days, and that's just something that I tend to handle myself. But I think the message that I'd like to spread is that as men, and if we're doing a hockey podcast, it'll probably be viewed and listened to by women as well as men, but predominantly men. I think we need to reach out more. We need to combat those toxic masculine stereotypes that we're taught from our parents, our friendship groups, our hockey coaches, our hockey dressing rooms, because I grew up in a place where you would never ask for help, as you quite rightly said, and I think probably our generation are in that sort of space, and I think that needs to change. I think it is changing, but I can tell you the statistics of people that we see as referrals coming through Big Moose Charity are 25% men, 75% women. And that balance needs to shift. There needs to be a change, and more men need to go, I'm struggling, I need help. Because it's not anything to be ashamed of. And when you ask for help, that's a really brave thing. I've got a friend of mine, Lewis Robling, who's an ex-professional rugby player, and he asked for help through us probably about 3 years ago. And it was, by his own admission, probably one of the best things that he ever did was actually being able to be vulnerable. And I think that's something that men aren't actually taught, how to be vulnerable and emotional and to cry, because it's frowned upon by our peers and community and society. That has to change, because there's too many people being killed by suicide annually, and we need to change that. And at Big Moose we are, but I think it's a societal thing. I think we on podcasts like this can help people by saying it's okay to say you're not okay and being brave enough to put your hand up. So if anybody's watching or listening and needs any help and they're struggling with anything, then please reach out. I'm sure Nick will put notes up or put our contact details, but we're online at bigmoose.charity. You'll find us. We've got a very simple system. What we pride ourselves in is making contact with somebody that makes contact with us within 24 hours. There's no waiting lists. There's no list of whether you've tried to kill yourself, or no sort of checklist like the NHS have got. It's just a straight, you need help. And within 24 hours, we'll come back to you. And within a week, I can guarantee that you'll be sitting in front of a therapist being helped. So if anything can come out of this podcast, I would love that to be the case, that we can help one or more people along the way to actually get some help.
Beautiful way to end it, Jeff. I do know this, is that when I asked for help, it was probably one of the well, it saved my life. But what I did was I helped fulfill someone else's purpose. And I think that's the thing. When you're asking for help, it's not selfish. You're actually helping somebody in their own journey build and live their purpose. So also check up on your guys, check up on people, on one another. I think I find that's very important too. Yeah.
Ask how people are doing. And if you feel that they're not doing well, they're probably not doing well. So it's a responsibility of all of us to check in, like you quite rightly said, Nick.
Yeah. Jeff Smith, thank you for all you do. Thank you for continuing to inspire me. I'm glad that we've done this together. This little podcast is going up to a group of people who we all care about, which is the UK ice hockey community. And I'm sure our paths are not just crossing, but they're aligning to be able to do more amazing stuff in the future. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for the opportunity, Nick. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Take it easy, folks, and don't forget to stay tuned for more episodes of Retribe Stick Together. Till then, bye for now.